But you know what, Ben? I think it's time to get strockified.
So you think that you can just buy a piece of land and throw a tiny home on it? Want to know the truth? So I'm Ben Struck, and I'm here with my boy Dennis Scott, and we're talking about what it takes to actually build on land in Santa Cruz County. And Dennis, you've been getting a lot of inquiries, more and more every day. And what is the truth? People want to know what's the first step?
You get with a reputable agent like myself. That's the first step. The second step is, when you find the land that you're interested in, there are a few things that go into the process. Is the land buildable? Is there an existing septic, water? What utilities are currently there?
Yeah, roadway going into the house.
Definitely.
And how are they going to access it? And if somebody is blind to all these things, what would be the first step that they would actually take to investigate and figure out, where they're at?
Ben, that's a great question. So one of the first things I would advise my clients is to do your due diligence. Let's go together to the county's office. Let's go to the environmental health department. Let's see if it's buildable. Let's get some percolation tests done. Let's speak with a land lender. That would be one of the primary things I would say. Let's speak to a land lender to figure it out, your finances and what your buying power is and what that process looks like financially.
Yeah, we often get calls into the office, and we have for years. Yeah. Somebody says, hey, look, I really just want to buy that land and just throw a tiny home out there, and you're sitting there laughing because you know the truth of what the county might say, or the city of Santa Cruz might say, the city of Scotts Valley, city of Watsonville, whatever.
Definitely.
What would be the response that the county or municipality might say to somebody? What would be, if they want to put a tiny home or a modular unit out there, what do they have to do?
So one of the things after you figured out your financing is, okay, is the land actually buildable? There are a few tests that need to be done. There are land surveys that need to happen. There's soil tests. Is the land sloped? In rural areas, if it's sloped more than 30%, there's an issue there.
Issue with county not allowing ingress or egress, correct?
Definitely, correct. And it's not a quick process. A lot of people think, when they're purchasing land, I'll be in there in no time. It takes years before you actually have a home built up where you can live. You're pretty much better off. If you can afford that process, let's talk about purchasing a single family residence instead.
I've found the same thing. So typically somebody calls you about land and they do not understand the development process at all.
For sure.
It just seems like the land is a more affordable route. But when you start figuring out what is it going to cost me to get a road into there? What is it going to cost to actually have a soils test? Oftentimes soils tests are in the tens of thousands of dollars just to get the percolation tests done and figure out what kind of soil and substrate you have. So then they're figuring out that, well, then you got to put in the planning of actually paying an architect to draw your plans.
For sure.
And then you got to build your structure, and then how do you get the financing to build the structure? Can you actually just park something out there? When you're seeing this and you're talking to people about that process, where is it that people get hung up and actually stop that process and then switch gears?
Well, when we actually go to the county and we have that talk and they figure out, okay, this is going to be a huge bill, a huge task primarily to get this done, and it isn't a quick process. The turnaround is roughly more than a year, and in one point, to go back to the soil test and the percolation, you have to wait until it's rainy season. And here in California, where we're in a drought more often than not, you have to wait for a substantial amount of rain, a certain amount of inches. So it's one of those things that, okay, you weigh out the pros and cons. Is it worth it for you to go through this lengthy process to then eventually get into a home versus just getting a conventional loan and purchasing a home?
Yeah, because if you get a conventional loan, then you can make modifications to the house, make it what you really want it to be. And I personally built my own home, and I think this is one of the misnomers of buying land.
Yes.
I get exactly what I want.
Thank you, dude.
I mean, and the reality is that kind of doesn't exist either. I compare it with, my single friends who are out there and still single because they're searching for perfection. It's just so hard to get to that point. And I think realistically, the better approach is maybe you find a fixer, you take a project that's, you're actually able to take a bite out of. I mean, you've shown tons and tons of land. Is there anything that a consumer can do to educate themselves in advance before even coming to you and saying, hey, Dennis, I want to see this property?
Great question, Ben. What I would recommend for buyers to do before reaching out to a realtor, on Zillow online, they have specific information. Check out, is there a paved road? Are there current utilities there? Does it have a septic? Does it have a well? Is the land flat from what you can see in the photos? Is it in a rural area? And if it is in a rural area, is it more than an acre? So these are some of the things to consider. And also, so you can have a base understanding when you are looking at properties. I get calls from people who want to look at a plot of land because it's $30,000, it's $80,000, and they figure, oh, I can get a cheap piece of land and build up on it. I'll have enough money to build up. But oftentimes when we arrive at the property, it's primarily sloped and it's unbuildable. So now we have that conversation of, okay, well, let's look at some properties, some single family residences instead, because this is a lengthy process. You would really need a big purse if you want to purchase land.
And typically what's really nice about purchases right now, if you go a conventional route, lenders have actually come back out. I got an email this morning that 100% financing is back available.
Whoa.
96.5% financing. And when you're talking about land, what most people don't really realize is it actually takes a lot of your cash to put into it in that development process. So we love land calls. We're all about them.
I'll take them.
But we also need the consumers to help and get educated in that same process, so that way we're not wasting their time and we're not wasting our own time, and we find them that happy medium.
And to that point, I'll take the land calls because it's an opportunity to show my value and to educate and still work with that buyer because everyone we're at different levels in our real estate journey. So when you're looking at land, I'm not going to look at it like, oh, you're not serious, you're in la la land. It's an opportunity for me to educate you on the process and give you other options to create that framework where you can make the best decision possible.
I love your mentality. And I love having this guy here in our office.
For sure.
That's Dennis Scott.
You know what, Ben? I think it's time to get strockified.